Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Keller, your host, as happy as can be to be back here with you on a Monday afternoon. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here with us. We're going to do open forum the first hour. 888-318-7884 is the number. Second hour, Michael Lofton will be here with us and from Reason and Theology, and we're going to talk about his new book, Answering Orthodoxy, a Catholic response to attacks from the East. And whether you are an Orthodox Christian, a Catholic person, or neither of the above, if you want to get involved in that conversation, that will be second hour. This hour, Joe Heschmeyer is our guest, the author of a whole bunch of books, including this one, The Eucharist is Really Jesus, How Christ's Body and Blood Are the Key to Everything We Believe. Mr. Joe Heschmeyer, welcome.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for being here. We do appreciate it. You're nothing if not punctual.
I was trying to join the chat 5 minutes early, and I got in at like 2 minutes till.
Yeah.
So, I tried to give it a lot of time.
No,
keep you on your toes.
They say in radio, as long as you're in front of the microphone when the music stops playing, you're on time. So
I feel like you may have made this saying up to justify.
No, this is many people say this. They also say don't pick on Joe. So these are two big radio things that people say.
The two cardinal rules of radio.
Yeah, right.
I see how well you observe them. Yeah.
888-318-7884. Joe is a podcaster now, and I don't know if he's even going to do the show anymore after a while because he's getting so popular on the podcast that he might be like, see my people about that. I don't know if I'm going to come on.
Right.
But congratulations on all the all the success at Shameless Popery.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little bit of both, a little bit of excessive, a little shameless. Yeah, so it's been great. It's been really beautiful, and I'll say I've been doing a 5-week series, responding to atheism, and it's been really good to get in the weeds with atheist commenters who are thoughtful and critical and posing counters, and you get to jump in and say, okay, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Here's the response. Because in a lot of cases, I think they maybe just haven't met Christians of any stripe who can really defend logically why we believe what we believe. And it's not just, well, the Bible says so, that there are, good logical reasons to believe. Why is there something rather than nothing? Well, that's one of the themes I was looking at this past week. And so it's been a real pleasure to do that. I've done a lot of Catholic Protestant stuff. And to be honest with you, that's probably my favorite thing to do. But the Christian atheist stuff is just more important. So it's been a pleasure to get to do that.
Oh, that's great. Very, very good. There is a kind of, there was the great, huge wave of atheism that came in the early part of this century. It seems that the wave has receded a little bit, but even in receding as a kind of social movement that was getting tons of attention, even as those waters receded, what they left behind was lots of people who are still atheists. It's not like we talked them all back into the church. It's just that it stopped being a newsy item.
Right. You don't get amazing book deals anymore. 10 years ago, it's like, well, if you want to get really rich, just write a book saying you don't believe in God and give some really silly reasons why.
Yeah.
But now, you're right. We see in the numbers. Now, 10, 15 years ago, there was an air of inevitability that we were going to become a really atheistic country. And I don't think that's happened. I do think that it's left a moral void. And I think if you want to understand American politics today, you have to realize that there's a need for right and wrong. And so once you get rid of God as a foundation, then you start looking to politics.
888-318-7884 is our number. An open forum means open to atheists. If you're an atheist person who'd like to have a conversation, we'd love it if you'd call. But in addition to atheists, non-atheists can call. That I believe that encompasses, that might not actually encompass everyone. But people categorize themselves all ways. So all I'm trying to say is anybody is welcome to call. If you have a question about God, you want to know about Jesus, you want to know about the Bible, the saints, the sacraments, any of it, you want to just have a conversation about it, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. I often feel like atheists have an advantage over believers because their comments or their takes are often more welcome in the media, in mass media. But I often feel like believers have an advantage over atheists in that God exists.
Yes, and that they're actually on the right side of the question.
Yeah, right.
And are supported by divine grace and
Yeah.
so many other things. Yeah, you're right. The one has the media, and the other has God himself.
Yeah. If that doesn't provoke you, our friendly atheists to call, then I don't know what I can do to provoke you. 888-318-7884 is the number. We will start out in Ohio today. Stephen is in Ohio. Stephen, you got to give me a quick second because I just realized I messed up the phones just before I said your name. So hang on, Stephen. I'm coming. Joe, anything that you'd like to say while I'm getting the phones connected again? Never mind.
I'm just going to watch you hang.
Never mind, Joe. We're back. Stephen, are you there with us?
Yeah.
Hello, Stephen. How old are you?
9.
9. Well, thank you very much for the call. We're glad to take it. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Heschmeyer.
How do we know that relics are real?
Oh,
that's a good question.
What a good question.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Do you want to know how do we know any relics are real? Like, how do we know that relics do something? Or do you want to know, how do I know this or that relic is real? You get the question? Because if you have a particular thing somebody tells you is like the bone of a saint, there's usually paperwork if it's certainly someone who died recently. Now, if it's someone who died a really long time ago, you'd have to trace back. Well, where does this church claim to have gotten it from? Do they seem to have gotten it from? And that can be kind of tricky because there are times where people would fake relics and they would say, "Oh yeah, this is, the bone of St. Peter," and it's not really. So there were fake relics. I'm sure there still are out there fake relics from people who are unscrupulous and tricked churches. But how do we know relics in general are a thing or that they matter? Well, because we know that the early Christians gathered the things of the apostles because they understood them to have the ability, in many cases, to work miracles. We see this, for instance, in the book of Acts, chapter 19, verse 11 to 12, where it says that God did extraordinary miracles by the hands of Paul, so that handkerchiefs or aprons were carried away from his body to the sick, and diseases left them, and the evil spirits came out of them. So even during the lifetime of St. Paul, people would come up and press something against his body and then go take that to the sick person that he couldn't physically be there with. Likewise, we find people putting their sick out so that when St. Peter passes by, even his shadow will fall upon them and miraculously heal them. And we go back even to the Old Testament with Elisha. When he's buried, another man's body is thrown into the ground where he is. And when the man touches his bones, he comes back to life. So there was very clearly a Jewish and then a Christian belief that the bodies of the saints or the bodies of the holy, God would continue to work through them, even if that person wasn't maybe conscious of the way God was at work. Peter doesn't have to want his shadow to work, or Paul doesn't have to want these handkerchiefs to do something. Elisha doesn't even have to be alive. And you can still see God's miraculous power at work.
Stephen, does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Will you call again sometime, do you think?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, Stephen, it was a great pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for the call. We will look forward to you calling back again sometime, but we got to take a break. We will be right back with more Open Forum with Joe Heschmeyer on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN is now on Twitter. Get short, timely messages from EWTN on your computer or cell phone. It's easy to stay up to date on a wide variety of topics. Pro-life news, Vatican announcements, catechesis, apologetics, the latest EWTN programming, and more. You can link to EWTN on Twitter from our homepage or go to twitter.com/EWTN. At work, at home, at school, and on the road. Stay connected to your world with EWTN's Twitter page.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kelly, your host. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. I would like to take a moment, please, as I do each year, to remind you to drive carefully tomorrow. There's tiny little people. They won't be able to see very well. Please drive carefully, even to work in the morning, because they might be wearing their goofy masks. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say goofy. I apologize. They might be wearing them.
Disney will come after you.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. They might actually be wearing a goofy mask when you think about it that way. Just be careful of those little small children.
I'm thankful. My 2-year-old, who is the child in our family most likely to run into the street, is wearing a high-vis vest because he's going as a construction worker. It has the added effect of us being able to find him easily.
That is so awesome, though.
It worked out so well. We went to a Halloween thing last week, and numerous times he ran around in the park, and we were like, well, there he is.
But wait a second. Where do you get a high-vis vest for a 2-year-old? Like, it's illegal for them to be working.
Well, you know, a very small adult. No, I'm just kidding. You just look up construction costume toddler online. And very
Was he
easy to
so
find.
excited to be a working
my
man?
gosh. Yeah, he went up to an actual worker in a high-vis vest and was showing him his fake tools, and the guy was, really indulging him.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Yeah. We
That
were
is
driving,
great.
and he saw a worker, and he was not even in costume, and he just goes, he's got a vest like me. So he now identifies with all construction workers. He's just in the union.
Very, very good. And I'm glad he's. If you're going to be a 2-year-old construction worker, be in the union, for crying out
Yeah,
loud.
absolutely.
The union benefits for 2-year-olds are amazing.
2-year-olds of the world unite.
Unite. Excuse me, Mike in San Antonio, Texas, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. You are next. Go ahead with your question for Joe Heschmeyer.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. So I've got a friend who's about 70 years old, and he is, I don't know if he's an atheist or just a very adamant agnostic. He grew up with some Catholic upbringing, but I think it was maybe an overbearing mother, overbearing about the faith, who somehow has turned him away from it. And he is an otherwise delightful guy. He has a lot of... he knows classical art and classical literature and architecture and enjoys fine wines, and he's well-educated, well-versed, but boy, is he anti-Catholic and anti-Christian. And so I don't live near him anymore. He lives in Florida. I'm in Texas. So I want to send him a book that I think, that I want to, he will, if I send him a book as a gift, he will read it out of friendship. So that's a good thing. So I've kind of got one chance to say this is what Christianity, Catholicism is, and why God is real and why it's not unreasonable. And I've been thinking about Mere Christianity. I love that book. I've gotten a couple of other book recommendations. I can't remember them off the top of my head. I was wondering if you had something in mind that would maybe convince him, given his background, both his baggage and his intellectual background.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I was kind of thinking through your question, I wouldn't go super philosophical. Because, logically, the case for the existence of God is prior in some way to the case for Jesus being the Son of God and Jesus rising from the dead. But if Jesus rose from the dead, then the other stuff pretty much follows. Then, okay, well, if Christ rose from the dead, then I can assume Christianity is true. And if Christianity is true, then theism is true and atheism is false, right? So you can kind of jump to the resurrection, as strange as that might be to say. So yeah, I think a book like C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity is a fantastic way of approaching that. Another example would be Lee Strobel's book, The Case for Christ. And so something where you're just getting into the basics of, did Jesus rise from the dead or no? And I'm assuming he's not like a super deep philosopher. He's not going to want the really in-depth sort of thing. So a book like that is kind of at the popular level, and I think will, if not totally convince him, at least hopefully stoke his curiosity and maybe give you a second bite at the apple where he might say, well, I'm not totally convinced. And you can say, great, let me send you this other book. Yeah, I guess that's where I would go with that. That I would start there with, did Jesus rise from the dead, and then move forward.
Are you familiar? I talked to Patrick Madrid like he's my buddy or something. I called him on the radio. He recommended and I forgot the name of the book, but by a guy by the name of, last name pronounced Fazer.
Ed Fazer.
Ed Fazer.
That's a little higher philosophy.
Yeah, Ed Feser is a
Yeah.
philosopher, and his book is going to be a little more philosophical. Ed Feser, he is very logically sharp. He's also a little sharp-tongued. Now, the time that he's writing The Last Superstition, or no, is that the name of it?
I was thinking about the proofs that he wrote.
He's got a few different books. Some of them are a little edgy in terms of tone, where I've known people who converted who were more turned off by his style. But at the time that he was writing in response to some really kind of acid tongue atheists like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins. And so he takes a somewhat similar tone in responding to them, of saying these guys think they're all that and they're really not. But I think Ed Feser is brilliant, and I think he's a great resource. But you might even read through the book and then decide for yourself, is this something that would be helpful, and would my friend kind of understand this?
All right. Thank you very much.
Can I include myself in the conversation just for one moment? I don't usually, but there's a new book from Father Robert Spitzer called Science at the Doorstep of God. And if someone likes that, if they like a kind of a science-y type of evidence, not proof but evidence type of thing, Spitzer is a very, very good writer, and it's a cool book. And unlike the two that Joe recommended, it's by a Catholic. So, take that for what?
Oh, I was going to also say...
Is that a Catholic?
No.
Oh, no,
Father,
Feser is.
Feser's,
Feser's a
yeah,
Catholic. And
No,
Spitzer's Catholic.
Joe recommended...
But Lee Strobel and C.S. Lewis are not. So,
both very,
which,
very good men, though. I was only
many
teasing.
Non-Catholic Christians also believe Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is what we're trying to establish here. I would say if you want to keep listening, callers calling in, if you want to throw out your favorite book on this subject, please feel free to add that.
That's a great idea. How about if we just throw them up there on Facebook? In the comment section,
Facebook and YouTube.
And then
we'll
throw some out during the course of the show.
All right. My conversation has taken a life of its own.
Very good.
I really appreciate it, guys. Thank
Very
you
good.
so
All
much.
right, so we're looking for something for an intelligent and cultured 70-year-old who doesn't believe in God to help him towards God. And so your suggestions welcome at Facebook, and we'll get to them. The number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. It's an open forum, and your calls are welcome. Up next, Kyle in Claremore, Oklahoma, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Kyle, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Yes, hello, Joe. Thank you for taking my call. I am a lifelong Protestant, and I went to my first Mass 2 months ago, and I joined the RCIA class, and I'm hoping to be confirmed into the one Holy Apostolic and Catholic Church in East.
Welcome home, brother. That's beautiful to hear.
He just said E. You're back. Okay, we lost you after you started the word Easter and didn't even finish it. But go ahead with your question.
We're assuming that's the word you started.
Yeah, right. We don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm hoping to
I hope it's not
confirmed
eBay.
on Easter.
Okay, very good.
Okay. So my question is concerning demonology. And, Halloween is coming up tomorrow, so it kind of got me thinking about that for some reason. And I got thinking because as Protestants, we tend to think of it as Christ is going to come back, and Satan and all of his demons are going to be thrown into the fire pit of hell and be tortured forever, and they get what they deserve. But listening to some exorcists, well-known exorcists in the Catholic Church, it appears that they actually enjoy torment and enjoy separation eternally from God. So my thought process is I guess the question is this: is it really eternal punishment for them if they actually enjoy it, as far as what's going to happen in the end event after the final judgment?
That's a great question. So angels, like humans, are made for union with God and cannot be truly and fully happy apart from God. And the further you get from God, the less happy you are. This is an experiential thing. I mean, ask anyone who's lived a life radically apart from God, and then you can see kind of how miserable it makes them. And so the demons have that. Now, if you've been in a place where you are in the wrong and you're, really mad at someone, there is a sort of pleasure you can get in disunity. As weird as that is to say, there's a sort of unholy pleasure you can get from just being at enmity with someone. But it's not true happiness. It's not satisfaction. You don't have anything like peace. So in that sense, I would say very deeply, no, the demons are not happy. They may, in some loose sense, enjoy rebelling from God, but they are, enjoying not having their hearts satisfied, not having their own spirits fulfilled in the way they were made from all eternity to be fulfilled.
Makes total sense. Thank you, Joe. And I'm currently reading your book. The early church was the Catholic Church, and I'm really appreciating that as a Protestant coming home. It's been a very true blessing. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. You know what? If you stay on the line, we'll get you my new Eucharist book. Save you a couple bucks.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, you bet.
That's not the way you do that, Joe. You have to say the title of the book.
Okay.
That's basic salesmanship. We would like to give you a free copy of Joe's book, The Eucharist is Really Jesus, How Christ's Body and Blood Are the Key to Everything We Believe.
Well, now, Kyle, I want you to tell me, did he mention saving money? Now, I don't know a lot about salesmanship, but I said you're going to save money this way.
I'm not trying to sell the book to Kyle. I'm trying to sell the book to the listener. All right, Kyle, hang on. We're going to send you that free book. Hey, our friend Devante in Odessa, Texas is on the line listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Welcome back, Devante. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you.
Very well. How are you?
Yes, I'm great. Joe, Jesus says in the gospel, not Jesus, but it's either Jesus or James. I'm a bad Christian. I can't remember scripture. But he says, you have not because you ask not. So if around Christmas time, you, Michael Lofton, Trent Horn, and Scott Hahn just want to fly down to Odessa, Texas, and just come answer all my questions so I can stop calling every few months, then by all means, you will not be rejected.
I appreciate that. If you want to get a local Catholic church in your area to come down and have us come give a talk, then you know what? We can solve that real fast. I'd be only too happy to come down there and have dinner with you and the rest.
It was James, by the way. It was James, not Jesus.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Thank you. Thank
Jesus
you.
does say similar things. Talking to the
No,
rest of the
well, James said it on behalf of Jesus.
Did you have another question, or was your question whether James or Jesus said that?
No. So I am not saying this to contend transubstantiation because I'm Protestant, but I do personally believe that the bread and the wine become the actual body and blood of Jesus. But recently, I was watching a James White video, who you know very well, and there was a part in the talk where he says that one of the ways Christians can know the early church fathers did not believe in transubstantiation is because they did not put the host in a ciborium or a remonstrant. And he said they also did not adore the host. And he said that he believed this was evidence that the church fathers did not believe in transubstantiation as the Roman Catholic Church defines it. So I know you've literally written a whole book as evidence by the previous call on this question, so I was curious how you would respond.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is that is incredibly weak evidence. And one way I would point to that is that there are plenty of people who have a high Eucharistic theology, not fully transubstantiation perhaps, but a high Eucharistic theology, like Anglo-Catholics and Lutherans, who in many cases still don't have adoration. So the idea that anyone who believes that the bread and wine become Jesus must have adoration is historically absurd. It is clearly untrue. You can find plenty of people who are very explicit that they believe the bread and wine actually become the body and blood of Jesus. So, for instance, St. Cyril of Jerusalem in the mid-300s says, you have been taught and you are firmly convinced that what looks and tastes like bread and wine is not bread and wine, but the body and blood of Christ. That's what he says to catechumens coming into the church. There's no ambiguity there. And so he very clearly believes this becomes the body and blood of Jesus. And it is adored during the liturgy. And there's plenty of other sayings to this effect. I mean, that's the mid-300s. So someone could say, well, maybe the church went off the rails by then. Then you get like Ignatius of Antioch, the student of St. John, he's writing about the Gnostics, and they deny that Jesus really came in the flesh. So they deny the incarnation. They deny he really died on the cross. They deny that he really rose from the dead. They think it was all a symbol. And so they also think that the Eucharist was just a symbol. And in response to this, Ignatius says not to have anything to do with them. And so he says in his letter to the Smyrnians in chapter 7 that they, the Gnostics, abstain from the Eucharist and from prayer because they confess not the Eucharist to be the flesh of our Savior Jesus Christ. And so he says don't have anything to do with them because they deny the real presence. There's no ambiguity about this. They don't have to have set up adoration chapels to have expressed that belief in the Eucharist.
That brings us to the break. Devontae, we got to take a break. Right back with more Open Forum with Joe Heschmeyer on Catholic Answers Live. Is relativism dead? It sure seems dead. Each day, new moral demands are made, and they are presented to us as absolutes. Everything, from transgender ideology to physician-assisted suicide, is presented as a moral good that all right-thinking people must accept. But Catholic Answers' own Carlo Broussard says look deeper, and you will see today's moralism is just relativism dressed up in new clothes. Carlo's eye-opening book, The New Relativism, shines a light on how the sacred moral teachings of this age cover up a deep denial of moral truth. Order your copy of The New Relativism today at shop.catholic.com and be prepared to defend the truth against aggressive relativism. The New Relativism at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
In These 12, The Gospel Through the Apostles' Eyes, best-selling author Rod Bennett gives a riveting re-examination of gospel events from the ground floor perspective of Christ's own hand-picked successors. In his trademark storytelling style, Bennett movingly depicts what it was like for the apostles to witness Jesus' teaching and miracles up close. Why did he call them, and what did he intend for them to do? Order your copy of These 12 today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kelly, your host. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest, and as you may know, Joe and I are two-thirds of a famous singing group called, well, not singing, just talking about stuff group called the Flannel Panel. And the third member of the Flannel Panel has joined us here in the studio. It's the president of Catholic Answers, Chris Check, and I assume with a big announcement. Hello, Chris Check.
It's true.
There is a big announcement.
Yes. Yeah. I'm up to half a dozen flannel shirts.
Oh, that's what you came in to announce?
Thank you for announcing.
Well, are you bringing them all to Rome with you?
I think I'll bring as many as I can. I used to have none.
Well,
it's all because of you guys that I own flannel shirts.
It's because of Edgar. Now. He called it the Flannel Panel.
Edgar.
And the Flannel Panel is going to Rome in a few days. Joe, we're just telling him now. He didn't know that he's going to Rome with us. But
no, I knew I was going to Rome.
Oh, you knew about that? Okay. But
Yeah,
how many flannel shirts are you bringing to Rome? Are you going to wear a flannel shirt every day?
Look, when I moved to Rome for 3 years, I packed the night before.
Oh, so you...
So if you think I've thought this question through in any great depth, I have another thing for you.
I would say Joe and I have dramatically different temperaments when it comes to travel.
I know.
I've already got the suitcase on the dining room table, and I'm making sure everything is in there. Yeah.
Well, Joe has babies, so he's got... there's no room on the dining room table.
No, it's abandonment to divine providence. He's just totally at peace.
Yeah.
He realizes he's not in charge.
It's a horrible quality he has.
Unbelievable.
The quality of
I am so jealous.
All right, give us that's not the real announcement, though.
No, there isn't.
My laziness sound like a
there is
spiritual
an announcement.
Okay, let's hear. Quiet down, Joe. There's going to be an announcement now.
Catholic Answers is returning to the high seas.
Returning to the high sea. What does that mean?
We're going on a cruise.
Boy, we have not done it for a long time.
No, the last time we cruised was the Danube right before COVID, and then of course we were supposed to do the Rhine, and COVID wrecked that, and now we're finally back at it.
Remember the Danube cruise, Joe?
I do not.
Neither do I. We were not invited, Joe.
Yeah, cruise control kept us out.
Cruise control.
Trent Horn was on that.
Yeah.
And Father Hugh Barber. That was great. But yes, we are going to cruise what I think is the most Catholic part of North America, and it's the St. Lawrence Seaway. So beginning in Montreal and ending in Boston, of course, a whole day in the old great Catholic city of Quebec City. We'll go to Saint Anne de Beaupré. But there's just a ton. There's the tomb of Tekeri Tekakwitha. There's just a ton of Catholic history essential to the development of the faith in North America. And that's what we're going to be focused on this fantastic cruise with the flannel panel.
We should have taught. Oh, we're going, Joe. We're going on this cruise.
All right, there we go.
All right, yes, we've been included. I can't wait, Chris, because first of all, it is everything that you described it. But I know you're going to do your talks. Will you talk about the Jesuits of Canada?
The Jesuit martyrs, and I'm also going to talk about a pivotal point in whether North America would be Catholic or not, and it's the battle on the Plains of Abraham for Quebec City. It really is a Catholic versus Protestant story.
Quebec City might be the most beautiful city in the Americas.
It's like going to Europe with half the plane ride.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course, if you live in Maine, you could walk.
Well, you could, but not this time of year.
Hopefully this is not a big walking pilgrimage or walking cruise.
No, this is a cruising cruise. It's an eating cruise. But in addition to these two great flannel panelists, we're very honored to have two special guests, and it is William and Amy Fahey. Will Fahey, who is the president of the Thomas More College of Liberal Arts in Merrimack, New Hampshire, has a better command of American/New England history than anyone in the world I know. There's nobody better at this.
And an absolutely charming speaker as well.
Give a little plug for him?
Yep.
He gave a talk at an event we were at where you'd given him a virtually impossible speaking assignment, and he gave a talk that weaved all those things together and was still interesting, and people spoke glowingly of it afterwards.
Totally knocked it out of the park.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. And also his wife, Amy.
Now, I've never heard her speak.
She's delightful. And of course, she teaches English literature at College of, or the Thomas More College of Liberal Arts. At Thomas More College of Liberal Arts. And what I've asked her to talk about, among other things, Willa Cather's magnificent novel, Shadows on the Rock, is set in 17th century Quebec. And if you absolutely want to get a sense of what this place was as a French colony, this is the book to read. And I've asked her to talk about Willa Cather's Shadows on the Rock.
How wonderful. How wonderful. Maybe we could do a kind of a reading group of it before we go. Like we could do an
start reading it now.
Group.
I'm a great admirer of Willa Cather, and if she just lived a little bit longer, she would have become a Catholic.
My wife doesn't like Willa Cather, and I'll tell you why. She says once you read Willa Cather, nothing else is quite as satisfying ever again.
So, Cy, when is this fantastic trip, and how do I sign up?
Well, it's June 19th. June 29th through July 6th of next year, 2020. I'll get it, Joe. Relax. I will get it eventually.
Why did you say no? That was. I didn't. You could have told me this anytime. I was telling the
Joe
guys
just found
during the
out he's
break,
going on this.
I was going on this because I saw a sheet with my face on it.
It's on the Holland America Line's MS Volendam, which we are going to call the Volendarn, though, because we are Catholics and we're just not going to speak that way.
This ship was just refitted like a couple of years ago.
Oh, and Holland America Lines is wonderful.
Very elegant.
You go to CatholicAnswersCruise.com and find out all about it. CatholicAnswersCruise.com. We really want you to come with us. It's going to be a wonderful time. And a magnificent part of the world. Will we go to Saint Anne de Beaupré?
We will go to Saint Anne de Beaupré, which is a major pilgrimage site for North America, and also we'll go to the tomb of Kateri Tekakwitha. Did I say that correctly?
You did. I'm really impressed with how you say Kateri Tekakwitha, because I always am super proud that I can say Kateri Tekakwitha, and I make fun of other people that they can't say Kateri Tekakwitha, but.
It always sounds like I'm saying "take it with you" when I try to say her name.
And by the way, Cy, you're from Boston, so you'll probably have something to contribute to this cruise.
Why do you act like I don't contribute?
Apart from your good looks.
Oh, good
We will
Lord.
definitely have a live session of Flannel Panel on the cruise. Or not? Well, I don't.
Maybe I'll do a talk about the Moravian, the massacre of the Moravian Indians in the Revolutionary War, which happened right up near there.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
The genocide of the what are they called? The Cajuns, the Acadians.
Oh, that's
the Acadian
right.
genocide.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So much to see. We'd love it if you'd come.
Here's one more.
Yeah.
We talk
give it
about
all away.
we talk about 13 colonies.
I love this part. I love when you do this
William's
talk.
going to talk.
Oh,
on.
you're
Will,
okay.
yeah. No, he's much better at it than I am. There actually were 14 colonies, and one of them said, "No, we're not part of this Protestant revolution."
That
would be Quebec.
Quebec.
Yeah, and people.
And then they got stuck with Canada. Like you got a better deal, Quebec. Nice going. Wait, was that you both act so serious? Was that a bad thing?
If Canadians want to call in and either sternly rebuke Cy or maybe apologize, please feel free.
Canadians are most
please
welcome.
call and apologize for my comments.
Yeah.
CatholicAnswersCruise.com. Don't go to any other website. They're all phony. The one you got to go to is CatholicAnswersCruise.com. Come with us June 29th through July 6th on the Holland America Lines MS Volendam. We want you to come.
CatholicAnswersCruise.com.
Flannel Panel Cruise. Thank you, Chris.
Glory, you guys are doing great work, by the way.
Well, one of us is, and I'm going to get him back to work now. Are you ready?
Please.
All right, off to Sweden we go. Stefan in Sweden, watching on YouTube. Thanks for waiting. You can come from Sweden to go on the cruise, Stefan, if you'd like.
It's a bit far from me, I would think.
Stefan, before you get to your question, I want to tell you something. In the United States, the Swedish government is running ads for tourism in Sweden. Did you know
Really?
this? And
I didn't know this.
And this is what they say at the beginning of the ad. This is how they start the ad. Sweden, we're not Switzerland. That's what they say because they're making fun of Americans for not knowing the difference between Sweden and Switzerland. I think it's hilarious myself. Sweden,
Also,
we're not
we
Switzerland.
don't ride polar bears.
Oh, now don't lie. You know you
And
do.
I've heard that the Swedish chef is considered a rude impersonation of the Swedish as well.
Stefan, go ahead with your question.
Yes. I would wonder, like, if inflation, where banks do it, immoral in the term of fractional reserve banking, where they when you put in a amount and then they can add an amount for a loan and then they just create the money out of there and they can use that before inflation hits on that amount. If that makes sense, the question.
I want to make sure I'm following. So it's money. Sorry. I want to make sure I'm getting it correctly. You're not talking about usury. You're talking about monetary inflation, right?
Yes, created by
central banks.
Yeah. When you put banks in, and they can add on top of that, and it's the inflation caused by lending and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a good moral issue to take a serious look at. I cannot say just automatically that all inflation is evil. And so, for instance, when Spain came to the New World, and leaving aside all the other moral issues that were involved there, they brought back so much gold that it devalued the per ounce price of gold. It led to inflation across Europe because gold was suddenly worth less. Now that money tends to not be backed by gold or silver or anything, it's much easier to have that kind of runaway inflation because with gold, there's at least some sense of it having some kind of innate value. When it's just paper, there's not really any value. Or now, when it's not even paper, it's just a number on a spreadsheet somewhere. And so the monetary system as it's constructed, it's really hard to keep it in a place where it holds its value. And so given the sort of choices we've made, where we've decided to have a currency of exchange that's not backed by anything real, that's just backed by the government sort of saying this is what the money's worth, it is very hard to control inflation. Like a government couldn't just say, no more inflation, we're all done. And so there's all sorts of related moral issues. There is a sense of economic injustice that you do if your bad choices lead to runaway inflation in a predictable kind of way, because you're making everyone's value, everyone's property worth less. So a family saving up to buy a home suddenly finds that their money's worth half as much as it was before. And so for a lot of the same reasons, something like usury is a financial sin, that this kind of financial exploitation of the poor by the rich. Likewise, when it's by the banks or by the government, there are serious moral injustices being done. And so if your actions are either deliberately causing or foreseeably causing and not sufficiently offset, if they're causing the financial ruination of people who are particularly the poor and needy, I think there's a serious moral ill there. I just don't think we can quite put it in terms of, inflation is evil, because in many cases, inflation isn't something any one actor is doing. It's just an assessment of the value of money.
Okay, Stefan?
Yeah, that makes like a something, but it can't be universalized.
Right. Well, so for instance, one of the drivers for inflation is raising wages as well as raising prices. And it's not wrong to raise wages, and it's not even wrong to raise prices if you need to. But when everybody's raising wages and everybody's raising prices, the net effect is that, maybe you were making $10 an hour, now you're making $20, but the thing that used to cost you $10 now costs you $20. That's inflation in a nutshell, where you might come out with the, exact same ratio of how many work hours it takes you to get a certain good, but now all the money you have in the bank is worth half as much as it was before. Now, I'm really oversimplifying kind of how that works, but you can see that even private actors behaving in a moral way of, I want to pay my workers more, it can have the kind of unintended consequence of leading to greater inflation, given that the money is not backed by anything and there's no inherent limitation of the amount of money in the system.
Well,
that makes sense.
It makes sense? Okay. All right. Stefan, I got to go to the break. Thanks. We love it when Swiss people call. I'm sorry. I thought he was not going to laugh for a minute. I thought he was going to be like, oh, now he's mad. Now we're at war with Sweden. Sorry, Stefan. I know you're not Swiss.
Break their famous neutrality.
We'll be right back. Australia. It's not Austria. Right back with more Open Forum. Joe Heschmeyer.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
I just want to share that 5 years ago, my lovely warrior princess and saint of a wife and I decided to adopt a little girl through foster care. She is the perfect round out of our family of 3 boys and her. Yes, there are challenges. Very grateful today for all the blessings that he has shown our family.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, where we are fully aware that Sweden and Switzerland are 2 different countries. I don't want anyone to think that we are not aware of the difference between these two countries. The number is 888-31-TRUTH. It's open forum this hour. Next hour, we're going to have Michael Lofton to talk about his new book, Answering Orthodoxy. If you are an Orthodox person and you'd like to talk with a Catholic about the controversies between our various communions, you're welcome to call. Or if you're anybody else, you're welcome to call. You want to talk about Orthodoxy and Catholicism next hour. I don't know if saying various communions was, I think that was theologically a mistake, but I'm going to put that in the I think you know what I was talking about category. Is that okay, Joe?
That's fine.
Okay.
Let's go to callers.
Simon's in Texas, listening on 910 a.m. Simon, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Thank you very much for having me on, guys. Mr. Joe Heschmeyer, I'm really big fan of your work. I was just watching a video from you not too long ago. But my question is, I was reading recently about some medieval bishops, and I noticed that they were numbered, like we number popes and such like that. So I was just curious why we don't do that anymore and why that's not a more widespread thing.
Yeah, so part of the issue is dioceses kind of change, and like the borders and boundaries and everything change over time. So, for instance, I used to live in the Diocese of Arlington, and the Diocese of Arlington split off from the Diocese of Richmond once Northern Virginia had a lot of Catholics, and it made sense for them to be a distinct diocese. So, or you have cases like Kansas City St. Joseph being one diocese. You've got cases of dioceses merging as well as splitting off. So it's a little tricky, especially in the case of a merger, to say, oh, he would be the 17th along this line, but maybe the 23rd along that line. So I think that's one reason. You also don't have the same kind of excellent record keeping for some dioceses that you do with Rome. I mean, Rome is the center of the Catholic world and always has been. And as a result, it's just much easier to trace we can name every bishop, and you can't do that for every church and every diocese. Once upon a time, people could, but in many cases, we've kind of lost track. That makes sense?
I'm assuming that makes sense. Does it make sense, Simon?
That does make perfect sense.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense.
Very good, Simon. Thank you. Thanks very, very much for the call. Hey, I want to send you a copy of Joe's book, The Eucharist is Really Jesus, just to say thanks, and I feel like giving it out. Adam's in Wisconsin, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Adam, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi. I love your book, Joe, that I just started reading, The Early Church is the Catholic Church. But I have a question. Recently, my wife and I went to see a speaker at a college. It's actually my son's college. And she is a Presbyterian minister that is speaking about the moral theology of abortion and how it's a good moral thing to do. Is it really worth trying to debate a person like that? She was on a stage, and we brought a bunch of people from 40 Days for Life were there, and other people from our church and other Catholics around. They kind of all sat in a group, but, I mean, really, is it a good thing to even bother going to see somebody like that?
That's a really good question. It's a case-by-case determination. I think you can do a lot of good if someone in the crowd, for instance, hears that and thinks, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's a good answer. Trent Horn has an excellent, really like pamphlet length, maybe like 40-page book on why we're pro-life. And it uses a lot of secular arguments. The audacity of someone trying to appeal to Christianity, I always just go to the visitation. Like after Mary learns she's pregnant with Jesus, she goes to the hill country of Judah, and John the Baptist, who is 6 or 7 months old in the womb of his mother, leaps for joy at the presence of Jesus, who is not even a month old. And so it shows very clearly that the only Christian conception is that there is life from the earliest stages of conception. Now, nowadays, even without the Bible, you can tell that from embryology. You can tell that from a wealth of scientific resources. But all of this is, this is before the 40 days that were allegedly when quickening happened. So just look at Scripture, look at Luke 1, and you can see Christianity is very clear about the good of human life being in the womb. So then you'd have to say, okay, so sure, it's a human life, but it's okay to intentionally kill an unborn human being. And then it's like, okay, well, look at the 10 Commandments with the bit about thou shalt not kill and square that circle for me. If you have those two things, that's all you need. Now, a person who's going to close their ears to that and close their heart to that, I don't know how much good you can do, but it doesn't hurt to be a witness to it. The only thing I would say is don't waste your time and energy. I've actually been to a talk where there was a provocative speaker who came, and there was a concern about students being led astray. And so a group of, solid Catholic students had me come with them, and we went to this talk, and it was only gray-haired people who'd come to the college to this thing. There were no students who'd attended other than the ones who wanted to make sure none of their classmates were led astray. And so you don't have to, go to every event. You don't have to solicit awful speakers. But if you have the time and energy and you feel called in that direction, it can be a spiritual work of mercy.
Let me just ask you if that makes sense to you, or what do you?
It does.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Yeah, and the speaker, I guess, is touring all over the country giving these speeches.
Was this a secular college or a religious college, or what was this?
It's just a private college that my son goes to.
I see.
And it's a UCC college, but he doesn't participate in any of that. He goes to a Catholic church.
Good.
Well,
but it's just she decided she's touring all over the country, and she is horrible.
Well, there's a terrible burden on people who will teach in the name of the faith, in the name of Jesus. And we should pray for them, because when you preach murder in the name of Jesus, that's a very, very serious spiritual problem. So, Adam, thanks. I'm going to keep moving because I want to get Patricia on here. Patricia's in Pennsylvania. Patricia, we don't have that much time, so if you can be kind of quick with your question, we'll get an answer from Joe.
I'm not famous for my concise expression. Here I go. I know that I found much joy in my re-education into the Catholic Church. I was created Catholic. As an example, I have 2 adult children in their mid-40s, both reaching out to me on their own journeys. And my understanding is that the Catholic Church is saying to me, I have an obligation to evangelize, yet the conundrum for me is that if someone doesn't have information about the Catholic Church, which my kids were just received communion, then they're not going to be held liable when they get to their judgment.
Okay, so what should we do in this situation, Joe?
Yeah, I think the first thing to know is that everyone will be judged based on what they knew. And that doesn't mean if you're ignorant, you're home free. It means you're judged based on how you responded to things like conscience. And it's actually way easier to fail to understand what God is saying at the level of conscience. And so I would point you to John chapter 8, verse 31, where Jesus says, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Like, you have to believe that just as it was good news for you to learn the truth, it's good news for your children and anyone else to learn the truth. And that we're not doing anyone a service by keeping them spiritually in the dark. The other thing is that we have the spiritual duty to tell the truth. And so if we conceal the truth from others, that falls upon us, and we are putting ourselves in greater spiritual danger. And so if you see someone erring and you have a duty to tell them and you don't do that duty, not only might they die in their sin, but that can be held against you. And so for both of those reasons, for their sake and for your sake, you need to tell them the truth. The very last thing I'd say, I was in a situation where I had a flight kind of thing get really messed up, and I had a 3-hour journey, and I had a conversation with a woman about even issues about the invalidity of a relationship she was in. And I was very nervous to do it. It was life-changing for her, and she broke up with the guy she was involved with that day. So don't underestimate what God and the power of his grace will do if you have the courage to have those hard conversations with your kids.
And thank you very much. You were succinct in your question, and I appreciate it. Joe Heschmeyer has been our guest. His latest book is The Eucharist is Really Jesus, How Christ's Body and Blood Are the Key to Everything We Believe. Joe, thank you for a very fine hour. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And you found out you're going on a cruise, so that's a pretty good hour.
It's a pretty good hour for me.
Coming up next, Michael Lofton will be here. We're going to talk about Orthodoxy and the Catholic faith. If that's of interest to you, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. As promised, our guest this hour is Michael Lofton, who you can find at Reason and Theology. You can see the YouTubes and the audio stuff that he makes over there, and just lots of wonderful stuff. But as many of you probably know about Michael Lofton, among the things that he is most noted for is this kind of dialogue, debate, ongoing conversation that he has about Orthodoxy from the Catholic perspective and with Orthodox and Catholic people about these things. Michael Lofton has a new book called Answering Orthodoxy, a Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. Michael Lofton, welcome.
Hey, Cy. Thanks for having me back on.
Congratulations on the beautiful new book, Answering Orthodoxy.
Thank you. Yeah, just got my copy today as well.
You know what? I liked the way you did the book because I realized I didn't. The way you kind of do it is, in quotes, you'll give an objection to the Catholic faith from the Orthodox position, and then you'll answer that objection. And as a Catholic, I honestly didn't know that they had many of these objections. There's way more than I realized that are objections to the Catholic faith.
Oh, yeah, and believe it or not, there's even more than the ones that I address there. But in the book, I have kind of like your top 30 objections, which kind of span doctrinal objections, historical objections, and liturgical objections. So I give you the most common ones that you're going to encounter.
If you'd like to get in on the conversation about Orthodoxy from the Catholic perspective, you're welcome, whether you're Orthodox, whether you're a Catholic person, whether you are neither, and you just like to get in your question for Michael, 888-318-7884. I feel like most of our audience knows what a Catholic is, but I feel like before we get into a conversation about answering Orthodoxy, we need you to tell us, what is Orthodoxy?
Yeah, Eastern Orthodoxy is going to be a community of 16 different autocephalous churches. That's a fancy term that just kind of means not necessarily independent, but self-governed, if you will, though they most of them are in communion with each other. And they have a past with us. So we, as well as the Eastern Orthodox, used to be part of the United Church, but we have gone our separate ways, unfortunately. You can't really pinpoint a particular date. People say 1054, but that's not really accurate. It happened over a long period of time. But unfortunately, there was a breaking of communion between our respective churches. And what we're trying to do right now is work towards reunion or recommunion.
If you'd like to be in on that conversation, again, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We live in a time of ecumenism. We've been hearing about ecumenism for decades now, and that has produced fruits, and they are important fruits, certainly. Does a book like this get in the way of ecumenism?
Some people might feel that way, but I don't believe it does, nor did I have any intention of it getting in the way. What I'm doing here is I'm pointing Catholics who are discerning Eastern Orthodoxy, so they're discerning leaving Catholic communion to Eastern Orthodoxy. I'm pointing them to the responses that we have from Eastern Orthodox objections. So I'm kind of showing them the reasons why they would consider leaving aren't necessarily valid. So they might want to reconsider their decision. But it's also beneficial for Eastern Orthodox to see how their objections to Catholicism aren't warranted. In fact, many of the things they're objecting to, I point out in the book, are actually found in their own Eastern tradition. So if they want to fully embrace their own tradition, that would actually help facilitate reunion because we would be on the same page. But it would not necessarily go against ecumenism, which is, again, working towards reunion. In fact, I think this should help facilitate it because I'm pointing out that Eastern Orthodox don't have to abandon their tradition for reunion with Rome. They simply need to fully embrace their own Eastern tradition, and they will then find things like the papacy, the Immaculate Conception, purgatory, things that they generally object to, they'll find it in their own communion. So I think that actually helps ecumenism.
Yeah, it sounds like it. 888-318-7884. But as you were speaking, it occurred to me so if people are leaving the Catholic faith for Orthodoxy, it might be that they would leave the practice in the Catholic Church because of an objection. But are people, or is it just I'm sick. Like, what are you hearing from people? Are people saying, I'm sick of the Catholic Church, all the scandals or whatever they might say, and and they have all the sacraments in Orthodoxy, so I'm going. Like, which do you think it is that's moving people from Catholicism to Orthodoxy?
Yeah, some people start with a position where they're dissatisfied with the Catholic Church, and so they then start to look for other options. They see the Eastern Orthodox have valid sacraments in our historical local churches, and so they then start to discern Eastern Orthodoxy. You certainly have many people who fit that bill. Others are either discerning Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy just from a historical perspective, and they're trying to determine which communion to join. And in fact, I think this book would even be beneficial for them. So Protestants who are discerning Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And then you'll have some who are just simply looking at things from a doctrinal perspective. They're not dissatisfied with their current communion, even if it's Catholicism. They're not dissatisfied, but they want to consider what is the position of the first millennium. You know, what did the church believe in the first 3 or 4 centuries? And they'll explore those questions. And sometimes they have a leaning towards Eastern Orthodoxy. And I try to show them that, in fact, the Catholic claims, including the papacy, are found there in the first millennium. So if you actually want to embrace the first millennium in the early church, you have to embrace its teachings, for instance, on the papacy.
Well, you know, we have a book from Joe Heschmeyer called The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Would an Orthodox person embrace a phrase, maybe something like the early church was the Orthodox Church?
Well, yes, most Eastern Orthodox are going to say that they are the church of the first millennium or even the first century. They are the Catholic Church. In fact, they'll use that term.
Okay.
When we refer to Eastern Orthodox as Eastern Orthodox, that's actually not even their official name. Their official name is Orthodox Catholic Church. And so they do claim to be the Catholic Church. And so that's kind of where the dispute is. Okay, well, what did the Catholic Church teach prior to our division? What did they teach on things like the filioque or purgatory or the papacy? They're, of course, going to maintain their views are what the Catholic Church taught then. And that's where we as Catholics have to answer some of their objections and show them otherwise. And that's certainly what I intend to do in the book.
Michael Lofton is our guest. His new book, it's brand new, as a matter of fact, and it's got just a beautiful cover. It's called Answering Orthodoxy, A Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. And I have to say, it is not a difficult theological tome that you have to plow through. It's very accessible in the sense that in bold is given the objection from the Orthodox perspective, and then in plain type is given Michael's response. Maybe it's 2 pages, maybe it's 4, 5, 6 pages. So you could do the 30 of them in very short order, or just find the ones that are relevant to the discussions that are going on in your family or where you are, and check those out. So again, I will recommend the book Answering Orthodoxy: A Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. If you'd like to just get in on the conversation here, 888-318-7884. I do want to ask you about the word attacks from the East, because I wonder if the development of modern technology, where we can actually converse with one another over great distances, but also the ecumenical movement itself, which has occasioned more conversation between us, has given rise to Catholics who attack Orthodox people who attack Catholics, maybe more than was happening even, say, 100 years ago.
Yes, I think that's true, and it's unfortunate. And that's not to say that we should ignore any of our differences and we shouldn't discuss them and even debate them. But it is to say that, yeah, some of the conversations that we have between Catholics and Orthodox are not the most productive. And so I tend to avoid that, in fact, in the book. I'm not trying to dunk on Orthodox and put them down. In fact, I'm trying to show them, look, there really is no reason for this schism to be perpetuated. There really is no reason. We should be in communion with one another because we share a same heritage, the heritage of the first millennium. And in that heritage is everything that we believe essentially. And it's in line with what they believe essentially as well. So yeah, I do agree, however, though, that some of those discussions online are not the most productive. And you can certainly see that from, as you pointed out, some Catholics who attack Orthodox and some Orthodox, unfortunately, who attack Catholics. And I'm addressing a lot of those arguments that you'll probably find in some of those circles.
But the Orthodox Church has produced saints, real saints, not like imitation saints, but real saints. And if it can produce saints, there's a tradition there that's worth honoring, not just attacking.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the objections that I address here is the fact that, for example, I belong to an Eastern Catholic Church, and we venerate some Orthodox saints after the period of what's commonly called the schism.
Yeah.
After 1054. Again, I dispute whether or not that's really when the schism happened, but we actually have some post-schism saints in Orthodoxy that we venerate in some of the Eastern Catholic churches. And I address that because some Orthodox bring that up as an objection against our own ecclesiology. And so I address that there. But by pointing that out, I'm noting that, yes, there is sanctity to be found in Eastern Orthodoxy because they have the seven sacraments. That's not to say that there's no point in reunion. That's not to say that Catholics don't have the fullness of the faith, but it is to say that sanctity can be achieved in the Eastern Orthodox churches, most certainly.
888-318-7884, Orthodox, Catholic, or other, you're welcome to call and talk with Michael about Answering Orthodoxy, his new book. Michael, before I go to the callers, just one more thing I want to ask you about, and that is the Orthodox view of the Bishop of Rome. Do they, is there a sense in Orthodoxy that they do need to be in communion with the bishop at some point and in some way, or is that no longer the case?
Well, it's a mixed bag. There is no one view on the papacy among the Eastern Orthodox, but what you will find is a pretty wide range where some will just say, look, there's absolutely no point in the papacy. The Pope is a heretic. He's a schismatic. We don't need him. You have that ranging all the way to some who say, we need communion with the Bishop of Rome because we need unity in the Eastern Orthodox churches. And the only way we can facilitate that is if we have the Pope as the universal head. And so you can find a pretty wide range there. So some Orthodox will certainly say, we need the Pope. Others will say, no, we don't need him. He's a heretic.
All right. Time to go to callers. We have to take our quick first break, and then we will come right back and let callers talk with Michael Lofton about his new book, Answering Orthodoxy, a Catholic Response to Attacks from the East.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Are you prepared to vote?
Citizens have a co-responsibility for society. The moral theology tradition teaches that one may not vote for an enemy of religion or of freedom, except to exclude a worse enemy of religion and of freedom.
Learn more so you're prepared when you vote this November. Visit EWTN.com/vote for everything Catholic voters need to know before picking up a ballot.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Michael Lofton is our guest. You know Michael from Reason and Theology, and also from, I would hope, from his appearances quite regularly here. Now he's got a brand new book out. It's called Answering Orthodoxy, a Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. If you'd like to talk about the relationship between Catholics and Orthodox people, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Byron is in Las Vegas, Nevada, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Byron, go ahead with your question for Michael.
Hi, Cy and Michael. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Happy to.
So I visited a Greek Orthodox church, and the priest there, it was part of a seminary assignment, and the priest there made an interesting statement. He said that we did not leave the church in Rome, the church in Rome left us. And so I was curious how Michael might respond to that.
Yeah, because of course, from their perspective, they're going to say that we left them, right? And so, here's the way to settle that question: who maintains the faith of the ecumenical councils that we both, as Catholics and Orthodox, agree on? Who maintains the faith of those councils on the papacy? If we answer that question, I think that will tell us who broke away from whom. So if those councils taught the Catholic understanding of the papacy, and now the Eastern Orthodox reject that, I think it would be apparent that it is they, in that sense, at the very least, who broke away. And if it is, if the ecumenical councils taught their understanding of the papacy, that is the Eastern Orthodox understanding, one of them at least, and not what Catholics teach, then it would be us who broke away by coming up with innovative doctrine that's not apostolic in nature. So that's ultimately what we have to consider. Now, what I do in the book repeatedly whenever I engage the objections against the papacy is I will take them to the primary sources that we agree on, the saints that we agree on, both as Catholics and Eastern Orthodox. And I especially take them to the councils that we agree on, the first 7 ecumenical councils. And I point out interesting points from these councils where they're backing up things like papal infallibility or even papal supremacy, which are uniquely Catholic and are not currently embraced by the Eastern Orthodox. And I point out in their own tradition, here are these Catholic doctrines. So in other words, to be fully Eastern, you have to embrace the Catholic understanding of the papacy. And so if what I am arguing there is true, then the claim that we broke away from the Orthodox is not true. It would be that the Orthodox broke away from the very teachings that their own fathers embraced at these councils.
Very good answer. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
He tends to do that, Byron. He does tend to do that. The number is 888-318-7884. We're talking with Michael Lofton about Orthodoxy and the Catholic Church. And we'll go to Ireland. Dominic is in Ireland watching on YouTube. Welcome, Dominic. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, how are you doing? Michael, first, I'd love to thank you. I used to be a radrad. I would say madrad for probably the first year of when I became Catholic, and your videos were the main resource that changed my mind and seen the error, made me see the error of my ways. So
glad to hear that.
Thank you very much for that.
What a gracious thing to say, Dominic.
Thank you. I have a few Orthodox friends. We had a conversation one night about, what was it again? Adoration in relation to Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And what their argument was is that there is no patristic traditions based around adoration, and that adoration is a post-schism occurrence. Therefore, it should be rejected. I tried looking through patristic sources as much as I could, and the most I could find was like pseudo documents of Chrysostom that were obviously written in the 1800s and the like. But do you know any patristic evidence of adoration, or that I could show them that adoration isn't like a heresy or something? Or
okay,
yeah, this is actually one of the objections I address in the book. It's objection 25, and so you certainly want to check out the book, but I'll summarize it here. Okay. Well, you can find things like Augustine talking about adoring the Eucharist. Now, the context seems to be whenever you go up to receive the Eucharist, adoring it, not necessarily taking the Eucharist outside of the liturgy and then venerating it. But the concept of adoring the Eucharist is certainly patristic. The occasion, the setting outside of the divine liturgy, okay, that is going to be something else. Now, I admit there is a little bit of a development here in the West with, again, adoring the Eucharist outside of the divine liturgy. I'm happy to say, even if there isn't any first millennium evidence of this particular devotion, that doesn't take away from the devotion itself, because you can certainly have devotions that arise in the first millennium, in the second century, third century, fourth century, or in the second millennium, in any century. There's nothing wrong with a devotion coming about, even if it wasn't there from day one. And in fact, I point out in Eastern Orthodoxy, the liturgical veneration of icons, the way that icons are venerated during the liturgy or even outside of the liturgy, is not necessarily something you're going to find in the first century. You're not going to find St. Paul adoring icons, perhaps in the exact same way that we would have it by the end of the Seventh Ecumenical Council, Nicaea II. And yet Eastern Orthodox have this devotion of venerating icons, as do we Catholics, because we also embrace that council. And some might say, well, okay, but that's in the first millennium. But sure, but why is the first millennium in the 8th century somehow a standard? What if a Protestant comes along and says, you know what, you came up with this devotion of venerating icons, and you have this thing in the 5th, 6th, and 7th century, but I don't see it over there in the 1st century, so I think it's illegitimate. Well, I think it's arbitrary to start giving dates here. The question is the devotion wrong in and of itself, or is it good and holy? And when it comes to Eucharistic adoration, it's good and holy. And the principle of adoring the Eucharist, I think both Catholics and Orthodox can agree to. The question of doing so outside of the divine liturgy, I don't see anything objectively wrong with that. So even if you can't prove the devotion in the first millennium, I don't think that takes away from the holiness of it or the legitimacy of it, any more than not being able to find liturgical veneration of icons in the 2nd century takes away from Nicaea II's decision about venerating icons. Does that help answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, it does. Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you very much for the call and for the question. Michael Lofton is our guest. His new book is Answering Orthodoxy, a Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. It's on sale right now at shop.catholic.com and probably anywhere else where you can get your Catholic books. Check it out, Answering Orthodoxy. If you have questions about the Orthodox and the relations between Orthodox and Catholic and how a Catholic makes sense of those, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Ricky's in Columbus, Ohio, watching on YouTube. Ricky, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Michael. Ricky?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, sorry, I'm at the gym. Sorry if you hear any music behind me. But yeah, I just want to say thank you guys for all you do. I'm a revert to Catholicism 2 months ago, and I made the decision to revert solely on the decision to reject Protestantism, and I never really discerned Orthodoxy. And I recently discovered Jay Dyer, which Michael, you might be familiar with, and he makes an argument for created grace and how Aquinas and Augustine developed this theology in the West, and how it's so different in the East, and things about St. Maximus. I know I threw a lot of stuff in there, but do you address these things in your book?
I do. It's actually the 9th objection where I address some of those things like created grace. I would also just point out that some of the Orthodox bishops in the United States would discourage anybody being catechized from some of the individuals that you mentioned there, which I'm very, very familiar with. So I would point that out. They don't necessarily represent Eastern Orthodoxy. Now, as far as created grace, I can deal specifically with that if that's what you wanted me to hone in on.
Yeah, it's something I haven't studied a lot on, but yeah, I'd love to know more about it if you can.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of a misnomer. Which is this is why I actually agree with Father Domik, who is an Eastern Orthodox priest who wrote a book objecting to some things in the Catholic tradition. But when it comes to the question of created grace, which I'll define here in a moment, he himself admits, look, this isn't an area where Catholics and Orthodox disagree at the doctrinal level. This isn't a point of contention. This is more an issue of terminology. I hear the music in the background. I can come on the other end of the break if you want me to finish it.
Yeah. Will you? If you're both, if every single person on earth will hang on, we will get the conclusion to Michael's answer on the other side. Hang on, Ricky. Right back with more. Want to get right to the core of Christ's saving message? Want a roadmap for living the life Christ calls you to? It's time to look again at the Beatitudes. In his new book, Heart of the Gospel, How the Beatitudes Show Us God's Plan for Happiness, Father Sebastian Walsh demonstrates compellingly how these 8 declarations make up the foundation, the essence, and the final goal of Jesus' teaching. Heart of the Gospel illuminates the scriptural passages from which we get the Beatitudes, explains the significance of their wording, their order, and their timing in Jesus' ministry. And it draws out edifying parallels and connections with salvation history and the lives of the saints. Most importantly, Father Walsh offers wise counsel from his own work as a priest and teacher to help you live the Beatitudes in your own life. Order your copy of Heart of the Gospel today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Our guest is Michael Lofton from Reason and Theology, which you should check out. It's easy to do. I tried it earlier today. You just type in Reason and Theology. You don't have to do anything fancy. Just type in Reason and Theology, and then your Google machine will get you there. He's got a new book out called Answering Orthodoxy, a Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. It's got 30 objections from an Orthodox position to the Catholic faith, and then in very simple format, it just answers those questions. And sometimes you just get page and a half or something. Sometimes you get 5 or 6 pages, depending on what is merited for that particular objection. So if you are in any way interested in the relationship between Orthodoxy and Catholicism, Answering Orthodoxy, the book for you. And it's on sale right now at shop.catholic.com. Ricky's on the line in Columbus, Ohio, and wanted to know about created grace. And you were in the midst of answering, Michael.
Yeah, and it's important that we define our terms, especially on this one. What Orthodox are effectively going to say is that with the concept of created grace in Catholicism, we're basically saying that that which we receive from God, grace, is created. So we're never really coming into contact with the divine. We're never really receiving God. That's kind of the way that they will put the argument. Now, here's the problem. This is just merely an issue of terminology. When we speak of created grace, what we're saying is that there is a transformation in the creature when we go from being a child of darkness, if you will, as the Bible puts it, a child of wrath, as St. Paul specifically puts it. And we're then made a son of or daughter of God. We're made a child of God. In that moment where we transition and become a new covenant member in Christ Jesus. There's a new creation. And Paul, in fact, talks about that. We're a new creature in Christ because we've gone from being dead to our sins to now alive in Christ. There's a new creature. What we're saying is that new creature, that is a new created reality. That's what we're referring to when we speak of created grace. This new creature that we've become. We're not saying that that which we receive, which is God's grace, we're not saying the grace itself is created. Otherwise, we would actually be saying that God is created because it's God that we're receiving. So we're not saying that God is created when we speak of created grace. We're saying that that which we received, which is uncreated, which is divine, transforms us and creates in us a new reality. That's what we're referring to. So really, it's just simply a misunderstanding in terminology, which again, I agree with Father Dominic, an Eastern Orthodox priest and theologian, who says, well, perhaps we might want to just call it something else. And he even points out in their own tradition, in Orthodox tradition, they do sometimes speak of created grace. But he proposes that we just call it something else. And I don't have a problem with that because there is no official teaching of the church that says you have to call this reality created grace. That's not official magisterium of the church. It's more certain groups of theologians call it that.
Ricky, I hope that that was helpful to you, and I know that you said you are considering orthodoxy, so I'd like to send you a copy of Michael's new book, Answering Orthodoxy. If you want to give us an address, just hang on the line. We will send it out because it's available now, so we can send it out to people. Answering Orthodoxy, a Catholic response to attacks from the East. But I got to keep going because I'm just realizing there are lots of folks on the line. Dan's in Fargo, North Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. Dan, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Michael Lofton.
Hi. I've been on your show before, a long time ago, and you told me I should have my own podcast. But anyway.
Well, how's that going?
Well, I don't have any interest in it.
Oh.
In podcasts.
Well, I've made
But
lots
anyway,
of useless suggestions to people over the years.
Okay, so when I came into the Catholic Church, I have to turn the radio down. I was confirmed by and taught by someone named Archbishop Jim Kelleher. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He may be passed away now. I don't know. It was years ago. He was an archbishop in Kansas.
Okay.
But anyway, he really stressed the Nicene Creed. Okay, that was, those things had to be, followed. Okay. But my question has to do with, he never stressed all the Mariology that goes on today, and whenever someone asks for prayer, all they get is someone starts up with the rosary instead of a prayer for them. And I was just wondering, does the Orthodox Church have all that Mariology too?
Great question. So yeah, this is where I think we're going to find common ground with the Eastern Orthodox. They're very, very high in their Mariology, and you'll see that especially in devotional practices and in the Divine Liturgy explicitly. You'll see references to the Virgin Mary very prominently. And so I don't think that this is an area where Catholics and Orthodox are really going to be at odds. I think that you're going to find that there's, in fact, a lot of common ground here when it comes to the Virgin Mary. I get what you're saying, though, when some people might give you the impression that there's an overemphasis here on Mary. And I understand that we can't necessarily overemphasize Mary insofar as in any time that we honor the Virgin, we're also honoring Christ and what he did. But I get that sometimes you might hear people talk more about the Virgin Mary than they do Jesus. And that might be a little off-putting. I totally understand that. But I don't think it's coming from a bad place with Catholics. And I don't think it's coming to the exclusion of Jesus. I think that they're just pointing out that the Virgin Mary is a great intercessor, and so that's why she has a very central place when it comes to interceding for us and petitions that we might have. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I I learned about the Orthodox Church from someone named Father Anderson out of, I believe, San Diego, California. He had a set of videotapes, and he never really talked about with their doctrine and everything. He never really talked about the Virgin Mary any more than anybody else would either. So that's why I was kind of wondering.
Well, it does sound like you have some troubles with the Mariology thing. I will be happy to send you a book we have called Behold Your Mother, which is about the Marian doctrines by our own Tim Staples. You just got to hang on, and I'll send it to you. But I didn't want to interrupt if you were continuing the conversation, Michael. I just wanted to offer that book.
Oh, I think that's a great offer. And yeah, I guess I find that interesting that he doesn't really bring up the Virgin Mary. That's kind of curious. I mean, you're going to find things in the Divine Liturgy where we say, "Oh, Holy Theotokos, save us." And so you're going to find very, very prominent aspects of the Virgin Mary in the Divine Liturgy. So I think once you're confronted with its devotional life in reality, you're going to see that there.
Thank you, Dan. Hang on. If you'd like a copy of that book, we'll send it to you. Rob's in Nebraska listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Rob, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Michael.
Yeah, so my wife's Orthodox, and after 30-some years, we've had any number of conversations on probably every topic in his book. But one that comes up quite a bit, and I've tried to do research on, is the difference between the two dates that we use to celebrate Easter. And so this year will be one of the extreme examples where it's like 5 or 6 weeks apart, and then some years it's the same. So if you could explain the debate on how Easter is calculated and maybe give me a reference, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, curiously, this was actually the first debate between Eastern and Western churches that we can find in the 2nd century. In fact, Pope Victor had a dispute with the churches of Asia Minor in the East, and in fact attempted to excommunicate them and cut them off from the common union, as Eusebius says, which here shows papal supremacy, because he's not cutting them off from Roman communion. He's cutting them off from the communion of the Catholic Church. And he got some pushback from figures like Irenaeus saying, maybe this is a little rash, may not want to cut them off on this issue. And that what they were disputing was the date of Easter. And what was pointed out to Pope Victor by Irenaeus and others was that, in previous centuries, like with figures like Polycarp, not previous centuries, but previous decades, I should say, figures like Polycarp and others celebrated Easter at different times. And these two groups would say, well, they got their tradition from the apostles, but they're celebrating Easter at different times, and they're both claiming that this is apostolic, when they celebrate it. And Polycarp and the Bishop of Rome at the time said, okay, let's agree to disagree on this issue. We both received our traditions on when to celebrate Easter from the apostles. So let's just agree to disagree on when it's going to be, and we're still going to celebrate the liturgy together. But Pope Victor comes along a little bit later, and, it tries to make it a bigger deal than it in fact was. And Rome eventually backed away from that, but you start to already see tremors between East and West on this very issue. And it kind of lasts until this day. The difference for Catholics and Orthodox on the dating of Easter has to do with which calendar do we use? Do we use the Julian calendar of a pagan emperor? Or do we use the calendar that a pope created in the second millennium, the Gregorian calendar? And that's going to then determine when Easter is. But in reality, what I like to point out is, well, when this dispute originally came up, and we see Polycarp and Rome noting that they have differences on, how to calculate Easter. They said, let's agree to disagree on this issue. It's not going to be something that breaks communion between us. And I think that that's how we should perceive it today. If we can't agree on a common date of Easter, which, by the way, Pope Francis and the Patriarch of Bartholomew are currently working on it. But if we can't agree on that, let's not let that be an obstacle for breaking communion, because the earliest Christians, the disciples of the earliest apostles, said that this wasn't worth breaking communion over. And I think that's the attitude we should maintain.
Rob, that brings me right to when I got to go to the break, so I hope it was helpful to you. But if you'd like a copy of Michael's new book, Answering Orthodoxy, A Catholic Response to Attacks from the East, I will be happy to send it to you. Just give your address in Nebraska to Edgar, and we'll send it off. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of this conversation about the Catholic faith, the Orthodox Church, and how we relate to one another. If you've got questions that fall into that vein, if you're an Orthodox person, you're welcome. If you're a Catholic person, you're welcome. If you're neither of the above, you are welcome. 888-318-7884.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Dive deeper into your faith as renowned speakers examine pressing issues facing Catholics today. EWTN takes you to Napa, California for a special 2-day event.
Oh, God has His way. God has His providence.
The whole point of the Christian life is love. Love of God and the love of everybody.
The annual Napa Institute Conference, beginning Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern on EWTN TV.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. You need to get on over to shop.catholic.com right now and get your copy of Michael Lofton's brand new book, Answering Orthodoxy, A Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. The promo code is Orthodoxy, and it saves you 25% off the already discounted sale price when you check out at shop.catholic.com. Check it out now, shop.catholic.com. Michael Lofton's new book, Answering Orthodoxy. Get an additional 25% off in addition to our fall savings that are going on right now when you use the promo code Orthodoxy when you check out. 25% extra off. The number here is 888-318-7884. If you've got questions about relations between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, you're very, very welcome to call 888-318-7884. Caleb's in Illinois listening on 92.5 FM. Caleb, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Michael.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me on. I'm a Protestant, but my question is about theosis, which, as I understand, is a pretty prominent Eastern Orthodox doctrine. But it's one that I don't know what Catholics think about. So, and I may not have a proper understanding of theosis either. The closest thing I can relate it to is sanctification in the Protestant history. But will you help me understand both what it is as well as what Catholics think about it compared to Eastern Orthodox?
Yeah, and you said you're coming from a Protestant background. Which one, if you don't mind me asking specifically?
Yeah, so I was raised evangelical, but I'm now in a Mennonite denomination.
Okay. Yeah, and when y'all speak of the order of salvation, I imagine y'all refer to the concept of glorification, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's kind of what this concept refers to. You do rightly point out it also includes sanctification, but glorification is also in view here. And what these terms mean for those who are not familiar, sanctification refers to growing in holiness, living a holier life. Glorification refers to that final state of what we're going to be when God is done working in us. It's ultimately going to be fulfilled in the next life. Now, what this refers to, theosis specifically, you'll see both Catholics and Orthodox affirming this because it's a biblical concept. So to answer your question, Catholics wholeheartedly agree with theosis because it's found in the New Testament. You can see St. Peter referring to us becoming partakers of the divine nature. to use his terminology in the New Testament. That is the basis of theosis, that we become partakers of the divine nature. It doesn't mean that we somehow become eternal, right? Because we're clearly never going to be. I mean, there was always a point in time in which you could say we were not. So we're not eternal beings. So we're not going to be God as God. But we can certainly become like him insofar as he gives us his divine life and transforms us and makes us a new creature in Christ. That's what theosis is referring to. And that's what Peter is referring to whenever he speaks of us becoming partakers of the divine nature. So yeah, we as Catholics, we're right there on board with Eastern Orthodox on the question of theosis, as any Christian should be.
Caleb? Did we lose Caleb? All right. Well, Caleb, I appreciate the call. Thank you very, very much. That's what happens when you use one of those Mennonite phones. You get these long pauses. No? Okay. I guess that wasn't funny. Sorry. Caleb, I was going to say if Caleb would hold on, we'll give him a copy of the book, but Caleb got mad about my Mennonite joke. I apologize, Caleb. Cecil's in Murrieta, California, listening to EWTN on channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Cecil, we're awful glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Michael Lofton.
Yes, I used to be Protestant, and then I came to the Catholic Church through the Episcopal, and then I became Orthodox, Antiochian, and then I'm Catholic. I came home to the Catholic Church, and of course the Orthodox love Our Lady, so there's no question there. And but what I was asking, what I wanted to ask was, I talked to an Orthodox monk, and he basically was saying that that the Rosary wasn't a good prayer because, you know, you're praying, you're focusing on Mary, and then you have a petition, and then, you know, and how do you, or even you're talking about the different mysteries, but you're saying Mary, you know, you're talking about Our Lady, and so I, in other words, for example, the joyful mysteries, obviously, it's much more conducive, I guess. I mean, it's not like you're bifurcating in your mind so much, but if you're looking, let's say, at the sorrowful mysteries, then but you're saying Hail Mary, you know, and then plus you've got you have a prayer intention that so you've got all this going on. And I guess as a monk, I don't know if this is necessarily just Orthodox in general, but just as a monk, just found that as not cognitive dissonance, you know, that wasn't really an appropriate thing. I don't know, you know, so I just wanted to get your take on if that's one of the issues that an Orthodox person may have with the Rosary.
You know, it's interesting that the Russian Orthodox Saint Seraphim of Sarov, who, by the way, I think it's Pope Francis has a picture of him, and I believe it was John Paul II who called him saint, if I recall correctly. Well, anyways, this Eastern Orthodox saint, highly venerated in Orthodoxy, often prayed a version of the Rosary. So I'll point that out. Number two, I don't know anybody who would dispute that Metropolitan Callistus Ware, the late Metropolitan Callistus Ware, is probably the most important figure in the last 100 years in Eastern Orthodoxy. Incredible bishop and theologian and scholar. When I interviewed him on my channel, I asked him about the Rosary and asked him his thoughts about it. He had no problem with it. He thought it was a beautiful devotion. So you'll find plenty of Eastern Orthodox that don't have an issue with the Rosary. As to those who say, well, you're focusing too much on Mary, I understand why somebody would say that, especially if they come from a Protestant background. But I think it's misguided because one is not focusing on Mary for the sake of Mary. Rather, one is honoring the Virgin Mary because of what Christ has done. And it is also, we are asking her for intercession so that we can be united more to God. And so the ultimate end here isn't somehow a union with Mary, it's a union with God. So I don't see anything wrong with the Rosary, and I don't see anything in it that Eastern Orthodox would ultimately have to object to, which is why many Orthodox don't object to the Rosary.
Got it. I appreciate that. Yeah, he happened to be a Russian Orthodox monk. So what was the name of that individual that I could cite?
Yes, Saint Seraphim of Sarov. Mm-hmm.
Of course. Yes,
Sarov. Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much.
Cecil,
Sure.
if you want to hold on, I'll send you a copy of Michael's new book, Answering Orthodoxy, A Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. It's out now from Catholic Answers Press, and we'd love you to have a copy. Thank you very much for the call. Michael, as I go through the 30, I have to say one of them stood out to me. And when I say go through the 30, there are 30 kind of Eastern Orthodox objections to the Catholic faith. And many of them are quite profound, and they elicit from you some profound meditations and responses. But one of them is Catholics celebrate clown masses. What does that mean, and why is it in this book?
Yeah, I know that probably takes people by surprise, right?
Well, it sticks out, I can tell you that.
This is probably the weakest objection that one could offer, and yet it tends to be the most persuasive for people.
Really? Oh, how interesting.
Because it's I think it appeals to people's emotions. I remember there was a debate between a Catholic and an Eastern Orthodox on my channel, and whenever the Orthodox individual was losing the debate, he just made a beeline straight for this objection, and I thought it was pretty interesting. What this objection says effectively is that, Catholics have these liturgical abuses, and so clearly it's not the church established by Christ. And I just think, look, this is a really bad argument. Because an abuse is just that, it's an abuse. So you can't say, well, because you have an abuse, that somehow means you're a church that Christ didn't establish. Look, in the Old Testament, they had plenty of liturgical abuses. That doesn't mean that the covenantal sacrificial system that God created was somehow illegitimate. It was, it was in fact legitimate, but there were people who abused it. No doubt. Likewise, Eastern Orthodox, unfortunately, in some cases have some concerning liturgical abuses in some cases. And so this is an issue that we all have. So we want to be consistent here. We don't want to be hypocritical. I would never say that, well, if there's a liturgical abuse in Eastern Orthodoxy, that somehow invalidates any of their claims to being an apostolic church. I would never make that argument, and I don't think it's fair when Orthodox do that with Catholics. Yeah. I'll also point out, I've never seen a clown mass. These are incredibly rare. That being said, you might find other forms of liturgical abuse in Catholicism, but it's just that it's an abuse. It's not something that should be taking place.
Well, it does seem to be picking on us for a fact about us, which is not a permanent fact. I mean, we are in a liturgical crisis in the Latin side of the church, and I don't even mean in all the churches that are part of the Catholic Church. I mean particularly the Latin Rite. We've been in a liturgical crisis for 60, 70 years. And, in the life of the church, that's a moment, but that would seem an odd thing to condemn us for. I mean, it seems more just maybe pray for us while we're going through it, but it's not a permanent feature of the Latin Rite.
No, it's not a good argument, but I will point out it does persuade a lot of people who are emotionally fed up with the liturgical abuse. And this kind of argument seems to promise them, hey, come to Orthodoxy where you won't experience these liturgical abuses.
Oh, yeah. But
you know what? The grass isn't always necessarily greener on the other side.
No. And as you have pointed out before, we have Eastern Rite churches in, who's like the liturgy, even if you use the old liturgy in the Latin Rite, it's a few hundred years old. But if you go to the Maronite Rite or Melkite Rite, you're going to get truly ancient liturgies.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Everything that you can find liturgically in Eastern Orthodoxy, you have in Eastern Catholicism.
Michael Lofton, again, congratulations on the book. The book is called Answering Orthodoxy, A Catholic Response to Attacks from the East. It's available now at shop.catholic.com. Get an extra 25% off. In addition to already the savings that are going on there because of our fall sale, just use the promo code Orthodoxy when you check out and you get that extra 25% off. Thank you, Michael. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Michael Lofton, you can check him out over at Reason and Theology. Just type in Reason and Theology into your machine, and you'll find your way there. Again, the book is Answering Orthodoxy. That does it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.